the rise of a new economic order. When Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in the United States came to power, the world was standing at the edge of a major transformation. Inflation was high, industries were failing, and governments struggled to keep control. Thatcher and Reagan believed that only a radical shift could reshape the future. They promoted a system where markets, not politicians, guided society. Their reforms pushed for deregulation, lower taxes, and privatization of state industries. This philosophy marked the beginning of a new era, one where money, investment, and global capital became the new architects of nations. Breaking the old system. Before Thatcher and Reagan, many Western nations relied on heavy state control to stabilize their economies. Public industries were protected, wages were regulated, and welfare spending was expanding. But this model became unsustainable as global competition intensified. Thatcher and Reagan targeted what they saw as an outdated system. They cut government budgets, challenged powerful unions, and opened their economies to global forces. These decisions triggered intense social conflicts, but they also unleashed new economic opportunities. The old system collapsed, making way for a market-driven global order. The power shift toward global capital. Thatcher and Reagan's reforms triggered a massive transfer of power from governments to global markets. As financial barriers fell, money could move across borders faster than ever before. Corporations expanded globally, and investment banks rose in influence. Financial markets, not parliaments, began shaping national priorities. Decisions once controlled by politicians were now dictated by interest rates, stock movements, and investor confidence. This shift created a world where capital became the most powerful political actor, silently determining the future of industries, employment, and even government policies. The weakening of labor and social protection. Thatcher and Reagan challenged unions more aggressively than any leaders before them. They believed strong unions restricted growth and damaged competitiveness. Their policies resulted in the decline of organized labor and the shrinking of social protections. Workers found themselves increasingly dependent on market conditions rather than collective bargaining. This shift created a new economic reality. Wages became unstable, job security weakened, and wealth inequality expanded. The labor force entered a world where power dynamics heavily favored employers and investors. The weakening of labor and social protection. Thatcher and Reagan challenged unions more aggressively than any leaders before them. They believed strong unions restricted growth and damaged competitiveness. Their policies resulted in the decline of organized labor and the shrinking of social protections. Workers found themselves increasingly dependent on market conditions rather than collective bargaining. This shift created a new economic reality. Wages became unstable, job security weakened, and wealth inequality expanded. The labor force entered a world where power dynamics heavily favored employers and investors. The financialization of everyday life. After Thatcher and Reagan, finance became embedded in daily life. Mortgages, credit cards, private pensions, and investment funds turned ordinary citizens into participants of the global market. People began living not just through salaries, but through interest rates, stocks, and debt. Financial institutions gained unprecedented access to personal wealth. This shift made economies more dynamic, yet more fragile. Crises could spread quickly, and individual lives were increasingly tied to market fluctuations far beyond their control. The era of global deregulation. Thatcher and Reagan championed deregulation not only at home but also internationally. Their political influence pushed global institutions to open markets and remove trade barriers. Emerging economies were encouraged, often pressured, to adopt similar policies. This created a worldwide system where capital moved freely, but responsibility did not. While global deregulation expanded trade and investment, it also left countries vulnerable to economic shocks and speculative movements. Independence of nations became increasingly tied to the decisions of foreign investors and multinational corporations. Cultural transformation and the rise of individualism. Thatcher famously declared, "There is no such thing as society." This idea became a cultural cornerstone of the era. Individual responsibility replaced collective identity. Success was framed as personal achievement, while failure was seen as an individual weakness rather than a structural issue. This cultural shift supported economic policies that prioritized competition over solidarity. A new worldview emerged, one where personal ambition outweighed community needs, shaping modern Western culture and influencing global values. The New World designed by money. By the end of their political influence, Thatcher and Reagan had helped build a world ruled by markets. Governments adapted themselves to economic forces they could no longer fully control. Nations competed for investment, corporations became transnational powers, and financial institutions shaped global priorities. This new world was efficient, fast, and interconnected, but also unequal, unstable, and deeply influenced by private interests. The blueprint they left behind still defines the global economy today, a legacy still shaping the future. Thatcher and Reagan's influence didn't end with their governments. It became the foundation of today's economic system. Their ideas shaped globalization, corporate power, and financial dominance. Even modern political leaders continue to operate within the framework they designed. The world they built remains powerful, but also challenged by inequality, rising debt, and new geopolitical tensions. Understanding their legacy is essential to understanding how today's world works and why money remains the most influential force shaping global decisions.